So if you've read about this trend over the past 5 to 6 years, especially, local police departments have been cooperating with homeowners and businesses that have cameras installed to make access to those cameras readily available to the local police department. Now, this varies in terms of how it's implemented in local municipalities, but where I am, the police department makes it a voluntary program. You can register with them, telling them how many outdoor cameras you have and make those available to them in case they need them to help solve a crime. As you would imagine, there are people who are both for and against such a program because it does seem a little bit weird to be giving access to your personal information to the police department. Let me tell you why I decided it was a good thing for me. So even with the increase in this, part of the backlash has been against Ring itself, who had jumped in and was participating with police departments, but since has kind of pulled back their level of participation and put it more on the homeowner to decide what to do with that. So unless you're living under a rock, you realize we live in a world of surveillance now, and anywhere you go, there are cameras, there are things watching you, you're recorded, and your face is relatively known in terms of the digital world. But we don't love that. We don't always want that to be happening. And so you may be a little apprehensive about it. Even in my own neighborhood, for me to go walk around the block, I'm going to be on several people's video footage. About a decade ago, our neighborhood had a series of break-ins where the burglar would come to the front door and ring the doorbell. And then, if no one answered in a few seconds, would go around back and break in the back door. Such a system, which is pretty common, would actually not be as effective if more people had doorbell cameras and cameras. And of course, a decade ago, very few people had these, whereas now it's become very common. So you can just imagine, not only for the particular house, but for the whole community. So what a crime like that, it kept happening in the same neighborhood because the burglar was familiar and probably local. And so that is a common thing that happens, which is much less likely to take place with the cameras we have today and participation with the police. So as a homeowner installing my own smart cameras around my property, 3 of them are doorbell cameras and then 2 other outside security cameras. I try to keep tabs on what's going on all the time, and so it's just a natural next step. As I mentioned earlier, I've given those to the police before, and so to me, signing up for the local police program is not a big deal because they're just going to send me an email if something were to happen to say, hey, do you have any video on this? And if I choose to share it, I can. If I choose not to, then I wouldn't. I've had 2 instances where I've submitted video to the police over the past few years. The first was this one with a man on my porch. Now, these are before this program existed, so this was just a police report I submitted. The second was one where we actually called the police and they asked for this video, and this man got arrested. He was threatening my wife and kids as they got in the car, and then they found him soon after this. My next step of thinking, though, is why wouldn't I? So if my neighbor had something stolen from their front porch or their back deck, and I had it on video, why wouldn't I share that with the police? Am I not interested in taking care of my neighbor? Am I not interested in helping the fighting of crime and the further prevention of crime as it goes forward? I know the video surveillance may seem too much, but if it helps figuring out who did something and gets them off the street and off the habit of stealing, then I think it's a positive thing to do. So like I said, it's voluntary and I already have the camera, so there's no cost to me, at least to participate at the level I am. I'll explain that a little bit later. In the meantime, behind me we have the bulletin board. Let me tell you about it. So even if you don't want to participate with your cameras, you can play Murder Mystery, and I'll just share this one with you. I bought this from Amazon, and it was a fun game for our family. It's clean. I know some of these games have adult content. This one was good for all of our ages and no problems there. So if you're interested, the Murder Mystery Party, and I'll link to it below. So as a homeowner in a neighborhood, it's also something we're kind of looking out for each other. We are in this together, and I share property lines with 5 different houses and properties if you include the corners of my yard. In some sense, we're always taking care of each other. Even if we don't really know each other, the safety of my neighbor's property is part of my own safety. Also on the street side, we're all kind of looking out for the street. The neighborhood watch has been around for a long time. So now we have more technology for a neighborhood watch. And so I don't really think it's a big deal and a big problem. No one likes crime in their neighborhood. And part of your quality of life is being able to come home and your home to be a retreat from everything else out there, and to come into your home and for it to be a place where you can feel safe and to relax. They all go together. And so that's what we all want. Now we can't perfectly achieve that. And so it's part of trying to achieve it, though, as we install these cameras and share them to essentially make things better. Where I live, there were actually 2 news stories recently of arrests that were made which were aided by cameras recording information. Now, the first one is a set of public cameras that the police use, which identify license plates and catch everything else. And it's in a big computer system, and they can track things, but they actually caught 2 murder suspects as a result. The other was more along this line, where a private camera was shared with the police, which helped solve a murder as well. To me, that is something you're going to want to do, are you not? Are we not wanting to help if someone has been harmed or killed, and to share what we can with the police to make sure that this person is brought to justice who has done that? Now, obviously there's opposition to such programs, and privacy issues or misuse of such things is really what comes to the forefront. And certainly there's the possibility of that, but to me it's not greater than the good that cameras would serve. And so the problem would be that people think a neighborhood might become overly involved in such things, or seek to profile people in a way that they shouldn't. Now, those are legitimate arguments, and bad things do happen in our world. People are not fair, and people don't always treat others the way that they should. And those cases are going to happen. However, I don't think that argument is as weighty as the argument of doing the good of taking care of your property and your space and your city. And so I think the obligation to help is greater than the hindrances of our shortcomings and maybe our mistrust of others that would come out in people. However, those are certainly very weighty matters and something to consider, but I don't think they outweigh the good of such a program. Now, every city, community is going to be different in how the police handles this, but where I live, the program comes in 2 levels. And the first level is the one I'm participating in and I feel comfortable with. It's the level where I have registered with the local police that I have cameras and that I'm willing to share footage if they need it. The other program is the level 2, and it is where you actually install a device which connects, and they would have access to your cameras on their own initiative. Now, they're not using them all the time in that level 2, but let's say you have a fugitive on the loose and he's running through backyards and climbing fences. Well, the police would be able to access cameras in real time to see if they can find that person. Now, it's pretty unlikely in most cases, and to me, it's maybe a step too far at this point. I'm not ready for that, but I can see a place for that, maybe. Considering that where I live, there's also a cost to be involved in the level 2. And so it's kind of hard for me to imagine a lot of individual homeowners doing it. Businesses maybe, but for the homeowner, I'm not willing to invest money just to participate in a program that I'm not sure I want to be a part of anyway. The level 2 to me is too much. The level 1, the voluntary response of participation, is where I am happy to be a part of such a program. The Vichy Police Department, as displayed in the game behind me, and any resemblance to persons in real life are merely coincidence and have no standing or validity. So these are not real criminals. In fact, they're probably not real people, but don't go looking for them.